On this episode of Engage, Evan Bach and Mark Cervantes, reps for Council 66, Mike Bell, FO rep for Council 20, and Trevor Boswell, our contract admin chair, join us to talk sick calls. Grab a hot tea, thermometer, and your favorite blankie. Here's your host, Jason Depew.
Welcome everyone to the Engage podcast. I'm Jason Depew, our new host. Today we're talking sick leave and sick calls. I'm here with Evan Bach and Mark Cervantes, reps for Council 66, Mike Bell, FO rep for Council 20, and Trevor Boswell, our contract admin chair, to help keep us straight on all this. How's everybody doing today?
Great. Yeah, real good. Thanks.
Thanks for having us.
Awesome. Great to be here. Well, the Council 66 reps recently sent out a letter about sick calls, reminding everybody some important points, and I really wanted to cover it in person for everyone to hear on the podcast. First off, let's talk about what can a pilot call in sick for?
I wanted to go back and talk just for a moment about why we sent out our sick call. I think that's important to mention that
Sure.
we did not publish our communication on sick leave out of thin air. We published it because we were seeing pilots reach out to us concerned about the way the company was reaching out to them regarding their sick calls. And we wanted to make very clear that our pilots in New York, at least, understand exactly what is required of them per our PWA when it comes to sick leave and what their rights and responsibilities are. And the important thing to remember is that we did not publish that out of the blue. We did it because we were seeing more pilots concerned about the manner in which they were being contacted by the chief pilot's office. To us, it represents a trend. And it represents the trend of the CPO being more aggressive. And in fact, I would even use the word intimidation to some degree when reaching out to some of our pilots regarding their sick use. And so we thought it was very important for our pilots to understand that there are protections in the PWA with respect to sick leave at Section 14. And to answer your first question, which is what can a pilot call in sick for? If you cannot exercise the privileges of your medical, you can call in sick, period, end of story, to include mental health. And it's the great opportunity to mention PAN, the Pilot Assistance Network. It's a union resource staffed by incredible volunteers who can speak with you about anything under the sun anonymously. If you're having issues at home or at work, any kind of mental health issue at all, please consider reaching out to the Pilot Assistance Network.
So, Evan, let's make this very clear for everyone. If you cannot exercise your first class medical, then
you can call out sick.
Awesome. So talking about mental health, that's an important one. It doesn't have to be something big and disastrous, some big diagnosis. It could just be something big in your family. Somebody in my family, I just found out has a serious illness. I broke up with my significant other. That's a big deal, and it can cause some mental stress that could reasonably make you unfit to perform your duties as a flight crew member. That's not a long-term thing. That's not going to last forever. But it is very important to not go fly when you're distracted with that. It's okay to take some time and be sick until you can get control of that.
Absolutely. And there was a great podcast an episode or two ago from our Pilot Assistance Network chair talking about staying in the green and how important it is to stay in the green. So just want to throw that out there. But I think it's also important to mention that we can't outline every specific incident or every specific issue that is okay or not okay to call sick for. I think it's very important just to emphasize that if for any reason, if you can't exercise your medical, you can call in sick. But the most important thing to mention here is if you're well, do not call in sick.
Absolutely. That's fair. We've heard stories of people who abuse that. So if you call in sick, sometimes it happens last minute. I remember I was pretty new at the company and I got sick right before Christmas, and I had a trip and I felt so bad, but I was sick, no kidding. And I wasn't going to go to work and get somebody else sick, and I wasn't fit to fly. So I called in and it was last minute. What happens if a pilot calls in last minute like that?
We, at least in New York, we've been talking to the CPO about how they handle it as well. Pilots can expect a good faith basis when calling in sick close to report time. For those that are unaware of a GFB or good faith basis call, it's allowed in the contract. It's a normal procedure by the chief pilot's office to call and inquire about the general nature of the sickness. But pilots who call in sick 2, 3, 4 hours prior to report can expect that call from the office. And that's not to intimidate pilots to not call in sick if they're unwell close to report time. It's just something that they're going to do.
Okay. And again, this isn't necessarily the end of the world, right? It's just them following normal procedure. It's covered under section 14F4 in the contract. And it's just the company saying, hey, this was a last minute thing. Let's just make sure that it was legit. It starts off with a call, right? And there's a time limit on it. They can only call within 3 days of the start of the sick occurrence. After that, they can't call. And they have to specifically state that it is a good faith basis call when they call you. It can't be, hey, man, I'm just checking up on you. It has to be the words, this is a good faith basis call. Is that correct?
That's correct. The good faith basis has 2 pieces to it. The first piece is the chief pilot or a representative of the company asking what the general nature of the sickness is. And the second piece is to ask you to verify that sickness by going to a doctor. And the second piece, the verification piece, must be conducted within 3 days of your sick occurrence. A good faith basis can be carried out at any point during a sick call. However, the second piece to that GFB, the verification piece, must be done within those 3 days of that initial sick occurrence.
And it's you have to be notified within 3 days, right? That they want the verification.
So for a verification, there's a couple of different verification steps. There's one where you're in a current verification status, right? You've used over 120 hours of sick leave in the preceding 12 months. And then there's the good faith basis one, which is a company's discretion as to when they want to initiate that process. The verification from 120 hours of use, that's automatic. You should know that from looking at your schedule. If a CPO calls a pilot and they want a unique circumstance as to why you're calling out sick close to a flight, that is going to be a specific good faith basis call within 3 calendar days of the sick call out itself. At that point, it opens up the option for the company to ask for verification later, but that verification does not have to happen within that 3 days. The good faith basis portion has to be started within 3 calendar days. From there, you've got to state the nature of your illness. And then at that point, you'll provide a doctor's note, which you can find on DeltaNet, and get your doctor to sign that. There are specific thresholds of certification that are unique to the good faith basis. And if you looked at contract 15 compared to now contract 19, we no longer have the doctor's note as a regular verification process. It's only confined within the good faith basis process. You'll get your doctors to sign that and you'll submit that back to the company. If the company still doesn't necessarily trust, and that is the key word here, trust, that your illness was in fact a valid use of sick leave, they may ask for a medical release, which is now in section 14F5 of documentation. It's very similar to the section 15 medical release process, but it is unique to only that sick occurrence. And they may ask you to release your medical records from your physician at that point. But that's the general rules and usage of the good faith basis call from the CPO. So to highlight, again, it must be clearly stated at the outset of the phone call that's a good faith basis call. It can't morph from a wellness check or just a how's it going into a good faith basis call. The purpose of the call must start and maintain with a good faith basis. And then subsequently from there, they may have some verification that they'd like you to do, as we discussed with the doctor's note and possible medical reform release.
Okay. And if they ask for a doctor's note or doctor verification, you go to a doctor, you pay whatever it costs, and you expense that on Concur, right?
That's correct. Yeah, you would pay out of pocket for all those things. Again, it's very similar to any sort of claims that you might have for reimbursement. Otherwise, you need to pay out of pocket for it. Do not utilize insurance money or HSA money or otherwise. Utilize your cash or credit card or check with the doctor's office, and then they'll reimburse you for that expense afterwards.
There's a caveat there. My primary care provider, their access to care is pretty terrible. It's 2 months, 3 months out to get an appointment. So if I call them up and ask for a visit and a doctor's note, they're going to say you can have one in 3 months. What do I do? Do I go to urgent care? Do I go to an ER and take the place in line of somebody who's got a broken leg or a heart attack to get a note done?
Fundamentally, the company does not care what provider you go to. So if it's the emergency care physician, so be it. If it's at midnight when they call and ask you for it, or if it's whatever's reasonable at the time for you to go see, could be urgent care. And again, traditionally, we've been primarily focused on physical health, right? But mental health is kind of a unique animal in all of this. But a medical doctor can fill out that form on behalf of a medical provider as well. There are some unique caveats with mental health that we typically don't think about because physical health is the one that most everybody has historically been used to.
All right. There's also a new exemption in the contract. It's a 50-hour exemption. It says if you haven't used more than 50 hours of sick leave in the last 2 years, the company cannot require verification. Are there any caveats to that?
Yeah. So as a new hire pilot, you haven't been on property for that long. And you may not even have 50 hours to use, depending on when you came onto property. As a new hire pilot within the first 2 years, you don't have that look back necessarily available to you, and therefore you would not qualify for that exemption. But upon reaching that time threshold at the company, you would be able to utilize that option if it was applicable to you.
The contract has 2 different exemptions to talk about some of these policies in sections 16F4 and 16F6. And then it talks about how we are supposed to respond to those requests in 14G. Can you talk through those for us?
Yeah, sure. Like I mentioned, there's regular verification for the use of 120 hours or more within the preceding 6 months. And then there's the good faith basis verification process. So let's start with the regular verification process. For a pilot under 14F6 of the contract, if you've used 50 or fewer hours of your sick leave in the preceding 2 sick leave years, those are full sick leave years, then you would be exempt from having to verify any sort of sick leave. However, the requirement there being is that you've been on property for at least 2 sick leave years. All right. So for new hire pilots or anybody within basically 3 years of their start date at Delta, you may not qualify for that depending on when you started. So you have to look at your anniversary date to determine that value. For the good faith basis verification process, that falls under 14F exception. And that one is a single sick leave year. As long as you use 50 or fewer hours there, then you would no longer be eligible for a good faith basis call verification process. And at that point, you just notify your chief pilot, hey, I didn't use 50 hours in the preceding sick leave year. I should be exempt from that. But again, as a new hire pilot within now your first 2 years of time at Delta, depending on when you've actually arrived on property, you need to look at that and confirm with your anniversary date. That would qualify there. So a little bit of nuance depending on the regular verification status using the QHCP form or the good faith basis using the doctor form on that one.
Great. Thank you. That clears it up. It sounds like we've been having quite a few new hires getting chief pilot phone calls when they call in sick. We already mentioned if they call, they need to state right from the start, this is a good faith basis call. If they don't do that, it is not a good faith basis call. At that point, what does a pilot need to do? How do they need to answer these questions?
The chief pilot's office can call a pilot. Absolutely no prohibition against that. I understand as a new hire, when you get a call from the chief pilot's office and you leave a voicemail with no information in it, how that can be intimidating. And so often we'll get calls from pilots who are still on probation and they just called in sick for the first time and they have a message from their chief pilot. And generally, majority of the time, the chief pilot's office is calling to remind that pilot to call in well and how the process works. In a perfect world, that could be done via email, but that's how the chief pilot's office is handling those situations in New York. And we've even had some situations where pilots have called in sick a couple of times. They're still getting that initial call from the CPO to remind them to call in well. As far as additional calls from the chief pilot's office, a good faith basis call, as Trevor mentioned, the chief pilot has to say it's a good faith basis call. But they are following a script, as far as we can tell, and going through the motions. I will say, if you do get a good faith basis call from your CPO, it's well within your right to ask why you're getting a good faith basis call. In fact, I would encourage pilots to ask the chief in a very respectful manner why you're getting a call, why you've been flagged. That's important information for you as a pilot to know.
Yeah,
Great.
and Jason, I'm going to jump in on this too, because a couple minutes ago you asked a question about GFP calls, and when you phrased it, you said, a pilot would receive a call, and this is the chief pilot's office, how you doing? That's not what a good faith basis call sounds like. That's how what we affectionately now refer to as a wellness check sounds like. And so if a pilot receives that call, and this does seem to be happening more with new hire pilots, and I don't really know why that is. As Evan said, it could be just simply that the chief pilot's office is, trying to capture the new hire pilots early, just to explain to them, how a sick call works. But I can understand, particularly from a new hire pilot's perspective, how that might feel. As Evan said, this could be done via email or something like that. So that can feel a little bit off-putting, especially for pilots who have been at airlines before. They know that a sick call is just that. It's a sick call. You call in well when you're done, and that's all there is to it. But as Evan and Trevor have both mentioned, if the chief pilot's office calls you and says, "Hey, I see you called in sick, how you doing? Is there anything we can do for you? How you feeling?" At that moment, if they have not said, "I'm calling you under section 14F4 of the contract under a good faith basis," then this is a wellness check. And pilots should know the difference. And the big difference is, if you're called under those terms, you as a pilot are not required to provide any medical information to the chief pilot's office at all. All you really need to tell them in that case is you called in sick, and the reason was you could not exercise the privileges of your first class medical. And as soon as you are able to do that, you will call in well. And that's it. That's the end of it as far as a wellness check goes. Now, if they're calling under a good faith basis, hopefully they're following a standardized script. I would like to believe that the chief pilot's offices are doing that across the board. I doubt that's the case, but I hope it would. I would hope it would be. But as everyone's alluded to so far, when they call you under a good faith basis, it says right here in the contract, such pilot may be required to state the general nature of their illness, or state in general terms, their sickness. And in that case, if you have a cold, you say you have a cold, or your ears are clogged, or you threw your back out playing golf and you can't sit, or your shoulder hurts, or whatever, or you are under, a significant emotional state perhaps, and you can't fly. A couple things to note here. The pilot will be provided the specific reasons as to why the company is conducting a good faith basis inquiry. That's really important. That means that the chief pilot, whoever's conducting, the chief pilot, assistant chief pilot, they need to talk to you. So if they call you, leave you a voicemail and say, "We're conducting a good faith basis, and now you need to go get a doctor's note," they haven't really completed the process as far as section 14F4 is concerned, because it says here that you need to be provided the specific reasons. And if you haven't been provided those specific reasons, then they can't go into the next steps, which would be either to consider the sick occurrence verified, or to then require the pilot to verify their sickness by providing a doctor's certificate, which is spelled out in the definitions of section 14. It's a really big distinction here. And I think it's important to note that there is a big difference. In Detroit, we put out a couple of comms about this last year in September and in October, because we were getting a large amount of these phone calls. And again, it was from a lot of new hire pilots who are trying to kind of navigate what these calls and what they meant.
Excellent. Yeah, let's stop that one more time. I'll just read the sentence from 14F4. It says, at the time of the notification, the pilot will be provided all of the specific reasons in support of the company's good faith basis inquiry. So to all our good chief pilots out there trying to do the right thing, will you please, from us, build a script? And when pilot Jason DePew answers the phone, please say, "Jason, this is a good faith basis call based on the following reasons, A, B, C. How are you doing?" That way we know for sure exactly what's going on here. That would help us, and I think it'll probably help all the chief pilots out there too. And if those items don't happen in that phone call, it is not a good faith basis call.
Yeah, that would certainly eliminate a lot of the ambiguity. And it should know, it's note in the contract under 14F4, such individual circumstances may not be derived solely from the amount of sick leave used by the pilot or the frequency of their sick call. So they can't call you and say, "I see you've been calling out sick a lot. We want to conduct a good faith basis." That cannot be their reason. They need a better reason than that.
Excellent.
Just to add to that, in addition, some of the reasoning that we've heard the CPO is using is, "You've been flagged by the system." That is not specific reasoning. If you call in sick 2 hours prior to the report, you call in sick on a holiday, that's a specific reason. But being flagged by the system, let's face it, a lot of pilots that are getting good faith basis calls, your name is on a list that has been provided by the company. And we have a lot of hardworking chief pilots out there that are reaching out because your name is on a list. But you are still entitled to a specific reason, even if your name is on a list and you've been flagged for a sick call.
And one last thing I'll add, to the specific reasons for GFBs, we know that there are certain triggers that will automatically result in a GFB, and those can include being assigned a trip on reserve or being assigned short call and then subsequently calling in sick. Another reason is scanning KCM or listing for a jump seat if you're a commuter and then calling in sick. The way the company sees that is you possibly didn't make your commute and then you're calling in sick. So those we know will trigger a GFB.
And we have other protections in the contract for that kind of thing. We have a great commuter clause. As long as you have a backup, you're safe. You've done your part, you've booked your jump seat or your non-reserve listing and a backup, you're going to be good. So there's no need to call in sick for something like that, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I'm just going to add to that, Jason, since you brought it up. We're not talking. What we're talking about here is pilots calling in sick because they cannot exercise the privileges of their first class medical. I mean, I suspect because a lot of these calls from the chief pilot's offices do evolve into a discussion about commuter plans, which would kind of imply that there's a possibility that the chief pilot's office thinks that maybe they called in sick because their commuter plan wasn't good or they missed their commuter flight. So the pilot just, banged out sick. And of course, we don't have anything to go off of. If the pilot says they're sick, then we therefore must believe that they're calling in sick because they are sick, not for any other reason than that. I mean, but pilots do need to understand that if they're commuters, their commute plan does need to follow the contract. And if there's significant overlap, like the sick call happened perhaps after the first commuter flight would have departed and the pilot wasn't on that flight, one can understand how the chief pilot's office might wonder what your commuter plan was. So pilots, for anyone out there listening, the contract says this specifically. So once you cannot exercise the privileges of your first class medical, the contract is clear. You must call in sick at that time. So don't wait until the last minute and think, I might feel better in a few hours. If you're sick, you got to let the company know. That's specifically written in the contract.
Absolutely. I will say on the wellness check side, I recently had somebody from the chief pilot office on a jump seat. We talked for the couple hours that we're flying. This chief pilot happened to be a very earnest person trying to do the right thing. And he said, when I call new hires, it's really mostly just to remind them to call in well. And he said it specifically because I've had so many people who are on reserve and they call in sick and they don't know to call in well. And so now they've burned all 50 hours of their sick leave for the year in 1 month. And they don't even know about it. And the next time they're sick, they need to use sick leave and they don't have any, and it's a problem. So he's really just trying to solve the problem. I do believe there is that out there. So if you get that wellness check, hopefully that's what they're going for. And that's hopefully why we can get them maybe helping us by using a script if it is a good faith basis call versus just trying to help you out. Evan?
The majority of our chiefs in New York are following the GFB script. In fact, frankly, that's not an issue that we're seeing in New York.
Okay.
I will say that every pilot that receives a call from the chief pilot's office should feel like they understood what the conversation was about and that it was not an act of intimidation. And they didn't feel belittled or blamed by chief pilot or accused of something that they didn't do. And if you feel that the conversation with the CPO went south, you need to please reach out to us in New York and reach out to your reps because we need to know the extent of these issues. No pilot should feel intimidated by their chief pilot's office. I know that our regional director in New York would agree with that statement. He does not want our pilots to feel intimidated. And we need to make sure that if you have conversations with the CPO or they're reaching out in such a way that isn't contractually compliant or asking questions that might not be appropriate, you need to please let us know so we can address that. I'd like to think that every chief pilot out there does this job for the right reasons to support our pilots. And unfortunately, that's not always the case. That's why we're here. And that's why you need to feel comfortable to reach out to us and let us know so that you can be supported by us and you can be supported by your chief pilot's office.
All right. Awesome. I'd like to talk real quick about what I call the sick leave contest. There's the rule in our contract that says if with any given category, if your category uses less than a certain amount of sick leave every year, you might get an extra 1 or 2 vacation days. in the next vacation year. Woohoo, awesome. It was interesting to me that no single category in the company won that sick leave contest last year. Did any of you guys pick up on that?
Yeah, and we certainly noticed that in Detroit, although to be fair, we have a lot of wide body categories in Detroit, so we weren't winning a lot of awards anyways. But yeah, people were certainly asking us about that.
I sometimes feel like pilots push being sick and they don't want to be sick. They don't want to screw up the system. They don't want to inconvenience somebody else. And maybe they don't want to lose the sick leave contest, such as I call it. And so maybe they've got just the sniffles and they go to work, but then they're getting other people sick. I'm not a big fan of that. I try not to be that guy, right? In my opinion, a vacation day is worth at most 4 hours and 35 minutes of pay. So if you won the top tier of the sick leave contest, that's a total of 2 days of vacation or 9 hours and 10 minutes of total pay you're going to get for not calling in sick very much in the prior year. I would say personally, if you're sick, calling sick, you're going to get 5.25 hours of pay per day if you're sick, at least. Why not just use your sick leave instead of trying to win this sick leave contest? Any thoughts on that?
I have a couple of comments. We've had a few pilots over the history of Gulf Airlines retire without having used one sick day. Supposedly. Wow. Which is, it's really a feat of, they must have an incredible doctor or an incredible immune system. Either way, because, I've been at Delta for 8 years or so, and I've been sick. I've had to call out sick before. I can't imagine going decades without going to work sick. So it makes you wonder if those pilots did go to work not feeling well sometimes for those reasons that you mentioned. And I'd just like to reiterate that if you are sick, call in sick. If it's 30 minutes prior to report and you're sick, call in sick. If you're on a 30-minute turn and you're sick, call in sick. But just be aware that the PWA clearly outlines what the company can ask you for. It's there for your protection. If you have questions about it, please reach out to either contract administration or to your reps. And our sick leave policy is by far the, in my opinion, best sick leave policy of absolutely any airline in the industry. And we have really fantastic sick leave, but you need to use it when you're sick. I can't emphasize that enough. But you should also not feel like you're being punished by the chief pilot's office for using a contractual right.
Awesome. All right.
I know Mike might disagree with me on the best sick leave policy, and
well, I mean, I certainly wouldn't mind seeing a sick bank of some kind that, but then again, there are pluses and minuses.
Our contract is really only as good as we can negotiate, and it's only as good as the feedback and input we get from not only folks that are involved in the union right now, but from like, I also understand that, yes, I mean, it may not be quite as good or so West policy in the past, but, these are all aspirational goals that we can work toward, for sure.
Absolutely.
I'd like to add a couple of quick tips, maybe. And if you get a call from the chief pilot's office, and this is not only applicable to new hires, but really to any pilot, and you're not sure what to say, or you're not sure why they're calling you, it's okay to call one of your reps first and ask. Number one, generally speaking, I think I'm batting 10 for 10 right now at predicting what the chief pilot's office is calling about. Not to toot my own horn there, but number two, if you are concerned enough, please know that we can also be a part of that conversation as well. So I don't want pilots, especially in New York, to think that they're going at it alone with the chief pilot's office. You have two duly elected reps that are here to support you and back you up when needed. The other thing I want to add is if you have to fill out a GFB form, please pay attention to the upper right corner of that form. It lists the specific doctors, nurses, dentists, etc., that can fill out that form. It will most likely be rejected if it is not signed by the appropriate level of medical professional. So take a look. And if you are going to an urgent care, it is in your best interest to call the urgent care before you go to make sure that they have somebody on staff with that level of certification to sign that form. If you have to end up going to an ER or going to an urgent care that's further away, remember, if it's a reasonable expense, you'll pay out of pocket. But if it's a reasonable expense, the company will reimburse you for that. Please pay attention to the details when filling out your forms because they do matter.
Excellent. Great advice.
Hey, Jason, I'd like to add one piece to the GFB. So if a pilot receives a GFB call from the chief pilot's office and verifies it with the appropriate note, those sick hours pertaining to that sick call do not count towards the pilot's sick look back.
Awesome. That's great. Great way to reset that clock.
I just thought it, yeah.
That would be
Well,
for the good faith basis sick call itself, actually, which would be separate than the QHCP verification.
Okay.
That would be when a pilot's been asked to provide their medical documentation, or the form at least, that would wipe out their look back for that specific sick occurrence.
So it would not go toward the QHCP window, essentially. So if you banged out for 50 hours and then had to go through the good faith basis piece, then that 50-hour trip no longer counts in the rolling 365-day look back toward the QHC verification window. That's what's important about that. Do I have that right, Trevor?
Well, the usage of sick leave is a rolling number regardless. The verification, the 50 or the rolling 2-year 50, that would just be tied to when that good basis call was enacted. Whereas the QHCP 120-hour usage is that rolling 12-month cycle. So it would be unique to that one. I'll add a couple of points in here. Obviously, we covered, the gamut of verification things. The sick leave year starts on June 1st. All right. One of the challenges here is, how do you utilize your sick leave in a way that is contractually compliant for a sick event that is legitimate? And the only basis that anybody should have is, Evan started this whole conversation out with, is you cannot exercise the privileges of your medical, is a very paraphrased way to state that. You can play the sick leave game. You can try to do all these things to get your specific base, the 2 days and whatever games that the company wants to play with respect to incentivizing not utilizing sick leave. But this is a negotiated benefit for your use. So do not feel like you don't have access to that sick bank, whether you're on day 1 or on year 35 of your career at Delta Airlines. These are hours that have been negotiated for your use. Depending on how long you've been here, you might not have as many, so you might transition to disability faster. I also don't want that to be something that precludes anybody from utilizing sick leave and flying sick. Just because you have only 1 hour because you got hired the day before the sick leave year resets doesn't mean that you're not eligible for the use of sick leave. So please use it if you are in fact sick. On the flip side, there are expectations and responsibilities that we have discussed that you have as a pilot utilizing sick leave to be able to verify the use of your sick leave. So be prepared to provide that documentation. Make yourself available if a good faith basis call is enacted to get that documentation. And the longer you wait to get it, the less likely a doctor or medical professional is going to be able to provide you that. Now, everybody understands that a quick illness, upset stomach, bout of diarrhea, you've got an acute anxiety, family situation going on at home, whatever, may not put you in a place that is going to have you in a doctor's office at a moment's notice because your primary care physician is unavailable, like we talked about 3 months down the road or whatever. Those are the instances where you need to utilize more emergency or urgent care types of facilities. And if it's a good faith basis call, you can expect that those would be reasonable expenses to be reimbursed. So please utilize those facilities as appropriate so that you can not only get the care you need, which is ultimately the reason for the sick call itself, but you can then obviously be reimbursed for those expenses as well.
During this episode's review process, a member of the MEC's legal counsel asked me to add an important point here. Being asked to verify an illness does not require us to get in front of a doctor while we are still sick. We are obligated to make ourselves available, and it's in our best interest to get the verification done quickly so we can get reimbursed. But if I eat a bad crew meal and have the runs, I'm probably not going to venture far enough from my bathroom to see a doctor while my symptoms persist. By the time I can get in to see one of Delta's recognized types of healthcare providers, my symptoms might be entirely gone. At that point, the doctor's note might only be able to say, Captain Depew reports an acute illness that precluded his ability to exercise the privileges of his FAA medical certificate. He shows signs of physiological stress consistent with his assertion, but that might be it. So this policy is written and negotiated, says that note right there has to be good enough. Now, the fact that I don't have to show up at the doctor's office while I'm still sick does not mean I can wait the 2 or 3 months that it will take me to get in to see my primary care provider. I may very well need to go to an urgent care or an emergency room to get that done. And I submit that reimbursement on Concur, and Delta has to pay for it because that's what they want. That's what they've asked for. But even then, if it takes long enough to get into the urgent care that my sickness is over, that's not on me. That's on the policy. And if there's any issues with that, that's when we call our LEC reps.
Another thing I want to keep note of, we talked about mental health a little bit towards the beginning of the show. The Spring Health Avenue that is on DeltaNet and available as part of the Employer Assistance Program. If you look at the good faith basis form, or if you look at the QHCP form, there is no mental health therapist listed on that document. So you have to figure out how to get that form filled out by a no kidding medical psychiatrist right now. There is no other medical provider that can sign that form other than a medical doctor in the form of a psychiatrist or potentially an urgent care type of provider or something of that nature. So if you are going through a mental health medical condition that you need service for, please make sure you plan accordingly to get that form signed by somebody that can actually sign it. Because as we know, telehealth, while extremely prevalent and available, it does not always provide the option for getting that form filled out in the way that we traditionally would have in a walk-in kind of environment. So just things to think about and considerations to have as you plan around your sick occurrences out there. Other than that, I think, Jason, that's all I have from a contract admin perspective. Happy to field any more questions that you may have.
Yeah, let's just dig in a little bit on the mental health piece there. It's a really challenging situation. It's new and ever changing, right? The FAA is currently changing their policies on all of it. And I don't think they have a good final answer yet. I have a degree in psychology. So there are conditions that are short-term. They're not life-changing things. They're just short-term mental health issues that can solve themselves over time. And you absolutely should call in sick for. It's important. And so we don't have a great way to get that documented for Delta if they do a good faith basis call. So we have to do our best, like you said, get some kind of qualified doctor to sign off on that. I recently had a situation where I had a family member get kind of a sudden, very significant illness. And so I just called the chief pilot and I said, look, sir, I am not in a mental state to exercise my privileges. I need to drop a trip. And they just dropped the trip for me. And it was no questions asked. It was great. We're happy to help. We're here to support you. Let us know what you need. And they dropped the trip and it was no pay. I think it would have been perfectly fair to call in sick on that. And if they had done a good faith basis call, it would have been a much more detailed process. But I personally feel like if you're a little bit open with them and you kind of explain it, I think they'll work with you. And if you have to call in sick first to make sure you get paid, what do you guys think?
Goes right back to being supported by the chief pilot's office. So I think there's sort of two angles here. Number one, we want every pilot to feel like they can call the CPO and have an open, honest conversation with them, just like you did, or get a call from the chief pilot's office and feel like they are receiving a level of care or compassion from the CPO. Now, in your specific case, I just want to, the second angle here is we're talking specifically about sick and specifically about that section in the contract. And there are some nuances, as Trevor mentioned, when it comes to mental health related conditions that I think it's a little bit of a gray area now, frankly. And I would never want to discourage anybody from reaching out to the chief pilot's office and being open and honest. But if you are in doubt of what that conversation should look like, please reach out to us first so we can help give you some guidance on what direction you should go, whether it is calling the chief pilot's office and having that kind of conversation, which I think is totally fair, or whether it's something that might warrant a sick call. You can always reach out to us before you make that call. We just want to make sure that, number one, you are cared for as a pilot. Number two, that you are working within the confines of our PWA, and that we are here to look out for your best interests, your health, and frankly, to ensure that the CPO and the company abides by our PWA. I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you're unsure about where to go in that scenario, please feel free to reach out to your reps.
Sure. Anybody else?
I mean, the only thing I can add to it is I'm just going to piggyback on what Evan said. As reps, this is what we're talking about here, these types of things. This is truly the reason, I hope this is truly the reason why the majority of us got into this, was pilots sometimes need help navigating this kind of strange career that we have. And we're here for you. If you get these calls from the chief pilot's office that you feel you you feel maybe a bit inappropriate, or you might have felt intimidated or something along those lines, or you're having an emotional, stressful situation, and you just want to talk to somebody, and maybe you don't want to talk to Pam, you haven't gotten there yet. I mean, in any of those cases, I'm gonna put you over to the absolute experts at the Pam committee. But this is what we're here for. I get a lot of calls from guys and gals who, I don't really want to bother you, but I got this call from the chief pilot's office. I'm really sorry. I don't mean to take up your time. I'm like, hey, this is what I'm here for. This is truly the bread and butter of what we do. So please utilize us as much as possible, because this is why we're here. We want to help, and we're happy to do it. All of our numbers are on the Alba app, and I think every council knows in the DART system. Our emails are at the bottom of every comm. Please reach out to us early and often, especially when it comes to this stuff. This is what we're here for.
I love it. Thanks to Mike, Evan, and Mark, and all the LEC reps for backing us up. I know that I have far more confidence in my ability to lead as a pilot in command, knowing that if I'm called to answer for making a tough decision, I can count on a duly elected and empowered union rep to stand on the carpet next to me. Thanks for the excellent discussion of sick leave, a contractually negotiated benefit. The fundamental criteria for using it is any time you're unable to exercise the privileges of your first-class medical certificate. Never be afraid to use it if you're in that situation. If you feel like somebody is putting undue pressure on you about a sick call, reach out to your reps first and they will back you up. Fly safe, everyone, and we'll see you next time.